Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. This time we're going to tackle some pretty wild stuff about human sexuality.
Sounds intriguing.
It really is. We've got excerpts from this text. It's just called pasted text. But let me tell you, the name's totally misleading.
Oh, how
Well,
so?
it's packed with these surprising facts that kind of turn a lot of what we think we know about sex on its head.
You've got my attention. Like what? Give me an example.
Okay, so have you ever heard of the Coolidge effect?
I have, actually. It has to do with novelty, right? New partners, renewed interest.
Right. But like, what's the science behind that? I mean, is it like just a case of the grass is always greener, or is there something more to it?
There's actually a biological basis for it. See, the Coolidge effect, it describes this tendency in mammals, and that includes us, to get a boost in sexual drive when there's a new partner in the picture.
Really? So it's not just a human thing.
Nope, not at all. Researchers have seen it in a bunch of different species, which suggests it's probably got some deep evolutionary roots.
Fascinating. So why would that be from like an evolutionary standpoint?
Well, think about it. Seeking out new partners helps mix up the genes in the offspring, right? And that leads to greater diversity, which helps a species survive all sorts of challenges.
That makes sense.
Plus, and this is kind of cool, novelty triggers a release of dopamine in the brain. That's the neurotransmitter that gives us that feeling of pleasure and reward.
Ah, so we're wired to crave new experiences.
Exactly. That dopamine rush reinforces the behavior, encouraging us to seek out more novelty.
Okay, that's kind of wild. So like that new person at work who I'm suddenly finding super attractive. It's not just me being, easily distracted. It's my primal instincts kicking in.
Could be. But don't worry, the Coolidge effect doesn't mean long-term relationships are doomed.
Ooh, that's good to hear.
The initial intensity might fade a bit over time, sure, but long-term relationships offer a whole different set of rewards. You build emotional intimacy, companionship, shared memories. Those are powerful forces.
Absolutely. And hey, maybe those dopamine sparks can be reignited by, rediscovering your partner in new ways.
Yeah,
Keep things fresh.
exactly.
All right, so we've covered novelty, but what about like the initial spark of attraction? Is it true that our bodies are kind of sending out these invisible signals that make us more appealing to some people than others?
It's definitely more nuanced than, say, a love potion or something.
Right.
But there's something to be said about the role of scent. We all release these chemicals called pheromones,
Pheromones, yeah, I've heard of those.
and they can be picked up by others subconsciously through smell.
No way, so we're literally sending out these chemical signals.
We are. Now, the research on human pheromones is still ongoing, but studies suggest they might play a part in who we're attracted to, even if we don't consciously realize it.
So that feeling of instant chemistry with someone, maybe our noses are secretly playing matchmaker behind the scenes.
Exactly. Plus, think about how strong the connection is between scent and memory. Certain smells can bring back intense emotions or memories,
That's so true.
which might explain why we can feel so inexplicably drawn to someone just based on their scent.
Wow, I'm learning so much today. Okay, now let's talk about something I know a lot of guys are probably wondering about. Morning wood.
Ah, yes.
We've all been there, waking up with an unexpected situation. What's the science behind that?
Well, the scientific term is nocturnal penile tumescence.
It's a mouthful.
It is. But it's a totally normal physiological thing. Most men experience several erections throughout the night, usually during REM sleep.
REM sleep, that's when we dream.
Right. Our brains are super active during REM, and it's thought that all that increased blood flow to the genital area during this stage leads to erections.
So it's not necessarily because of some, like, steamy dream, as some people
Beyond
think.
necessarily, no. It's more likely tied to shifting hormone levels and brain activity during sleep. And it's not just a guy thing, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yep, women experience something similar. Increased blood flow to the clitoris during REM sleep.
Huh. Fascinating. Our bodies are way more active at night than we realize.
Mm-hmm.
So speaking of things we might not be fully aware of, let's talk about female orgasms.
Great topics.
There's a lot of, I think, myths and misconceptions surrounding female orgasms, and it feels important to like set the record straight.
Absolutely. I think one of the biggest misconceptions out there is that female orgasms always, or even primarily, happen during intercourse.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've heard.
It's just not true. For a lot of women, clitoral stimulation is the most reliable way to orgasm.
So basically, there's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to female pleasure.
Exactly. The female sexual response is incredibly diverse, and it's so important to remember that each person's experience is going to be unique.
So focusing on clitoral stimulation can be more satisfying for some women.
Often, yes. And there's absolutely no shame in exploring different ways to experience pleasure.
It's all about communication and like really getting to know your own body and what works for you. Okay, and while we're on the topic of, understanding our bodies, let's tackle a question I know a lot of men have anxieties about. Penis size.
Ah, yes, that age-old question.
Is it really as important as society? Or maybe some men themselves believe it to be?
Well, research has shown, pretty consistently, that for the vast majority of women, it's not the defining factor. Emotional connection, intimacy, good communication, those things rank way higher in importance.
That's good to hear.
A partner who makes them feel safe, desired, and understood is going to be way more fulfilling than someone who, simply measures up in one physical dimension.
That's reassuring, I think, for a lot of guys out there. It's so easy to get caught up in these societal pressures and lose sight of what actually matters in intimate relationships.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder that sexuality as a whole is complex. It's this interplay of physical stuff, emotional stuff, psychological stuff, all these factors.
Right. It's not just one thing.
And sometimes those factors, they can manifest in ways that really challenge the traditional ideas of what's considered normal. Like, for instance, have you ever heard of objectophilia or partialism?
I can't say that I have. Are those like fetishes?
They can be, yeah. But they also show us how diverse human desire can be.
Oh, okay.
So objectophilia, that's an attraction to inanimate objects. And then you've got partialism, which is a really strong attraction to specific body parts.
Huh. Interesting.
Now, those might seem kind of unusual to some people, but it just highlights the fact that there's no single definition of what's considered normal when it comes to attraction.
It definitely makes you think outside the box.
It does. And it reminds us that there's still so much we don't know about how human desire works, Speaking of, uncovering those hidden complexities, what about arousal without awareness? Ever felt drawn to someone even before you consciously registered them as attractive?
Oh, all the time. Like you get that sudden rush of warmth. Your heart skips a beat, and you can't quite place why.
Exactly. That's a perfect example. It suggests that our bodies can actually respond to certain stimuli on a subconscious level. So your body's already having those physiological changes associated with arousal even before your conscious mind catches up. Pretty cool, huh?
It's like our bodies are speaking a secret language.
Right. And speaking of complex signals, we should talk about sexual orientation.
Yeah, that's a big one.
A lot of people find those rigid labels like heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual to be kind of limiting.
I can see why.
Because sexual fluidity is a real thing. For some people, attraction shifts and changes over time. Or they might just be attracted to people regardless of gender. Those labels can be helpful for some in figuring out their identity, for sure, but they don't always capture the full range of what people actually experience.
So it's more about recognizing that sexuality is a journey, not a fixed destination.
I like that. We're constantly evolving, discovering new parts of ourselves.
Yeah.
It's a process.
All right, now let's wade into a slightly more, maybe controversial topic. The whole debate surrounding the vaginal orgasm. What's the latest on that?
Well, there's a lot of discussion around whether the vaginal orgasm is actually its own distinct thing, or whether it's mostly driven by stimulation of the clitoris.
Oh, okay.
Some folks argue that the clitoris is stimulated indirectly when there's penetration, and that leads to the sensation of a so-called vaginal orgasm.
Interesting. So maybe it's less about two separate types of orgasms and more about just recognizing the complexity of the whole system down there.
Exactly. There's this network of nerves and sensations. And again, it highlights how important clitoral stimulation is for many women's pleasure.
It just shows that there's still a lot we don't fully understand about female sexuality.
Absolutely. It's a fascinating area of research.
Yeah.
Okay, last but not least, we got to talk about fantasies. The role of fantasy in human sexuality.
Okay, yeah, everyone's got them.
Right. They're incredibly common, and they can cover a huge range of themes, even stuff that might be considered taboo or out of the ordinary.
So is it healthy to, explore those taboo fantasies?
Fantasies, they're like a psychological outlet, a safe space for people to explore different parts of themselves without any real-world consequences.
Gotcha.
They don't necessarily reflect what a person actually wants or how they'd behave in real life.
Gotcha.
Fantasies can be a way to process emotions, explore curiosity, or just add some excitement to our inner lives.
It's like having your own private mental playground where you can experiment and play without any judgment.
Exactly.
Wow, we covered some serious ground today. From the biology of attraction to the complexities of desire to, the ever-changing landscape of sexual orientation. It's a lot to process.
It really is. And honestly, I think it highlights that maybe the weirdest thing about human sexuality is how much we're still learning about it. Every new discovery, it just opens up more avenues to explore and challenges us to rethink what we thought we knew.
So true. I'm curious, what surprised you the most during this deep dive? What sparked your curiosity? There's no shame in embracing the weirdness of it all. Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.